It happened at dinner, just like always. I had spent hours on it, slow cooking short ribs until they practically melted off the bone, serving them with a creamy polenta and roasted asparagus. It was simple, rustic, the kind of food that hugs you from the inside out. My wife Sarah took one bite, chewed slowly, then set her fork down with a delicate clink against the plate. Her eyes, usually so warm when she looked at me, were cold and distant. "This is peasant food, Mark," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "You really have to stop. It's just not sophisticated. It's beneath us now. Beneath us now." That phrase hung in the air, heavier than any silence could be. For years, cooking was my escape, my passion, my love language. I wasn't a professional chef, just a guy who loved making people happy with food. And Sarah, she used to love. She used to rave about my pasta, my stews, my crazy experimental desserts. She used to call me her personal gourmet, but lately, everything had changed. Everything I made was too heavy, too simple, too common. It was like she was trying to strip away a part of me piece by painful piece. I swallowed, the delicious short ribs suddenly tasting like ash in my mouth. "Sarah, I spent all afternoon on this," I managed to say, my voice a little rougher than I intended. She picked up her napkin, dabbing delicately at her lips. "I know, darling, and it's very sweet of you. But we entertain clients now, important people. This isn't the kind of food that impresses. It's not elevated. Elevated." That was her new favorite word. Her career in corporate law had really taken off in the last year, and with it, her taste, her circle of friends, and her expectations of me had apparently ascended to some new, unapproachable height. Our small, cozy apartment suddenly felt too small, my comfortable clothes too casual, and my beloved peasant food a major embarrassment. I looked down at my plate, a knot of hurt twisting in my stomach. It wasn't just about the food. It was about everything. The way she looked at me, the way she talked about our life before her big promotion, as if it were some embarrassing mistake. I felt like a relic, something to be tolerated, not celebrated. It had been building for months, this quiet erosion of our connection, but that peasant food comment felt like the final, brutal blow. It was like she was telling me my very essence. The part of me that poured love into a dish was worthless. I pushed my plate away. "I am not hungry anymore," I said, getting up from the table. I could feel her eyes on me, probably judging my lack of decorum, my emotional reaction to a simple critique. I walked into the living room, a hollow ache where my heart used to be. Kitchen, once my sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. The aromas of the meal I had so lovingly prepared now just smelled like failure. I spent the rest of the evening scrolling aimlessly on my phone, trying to drown out the echoes of her words. I was looking at old photos of us back when we were happy, when she'd pull me into a hug in the kitchen, her face dusted with flour, laughing. Those memories felt so distant, like they belonged to a different lifetime, a different Mark and Sarah. My phone buzzed. It was an email. I almost ignored it, thinking it was just another spam ad. But the sender caught my eye. Chef Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne was a legend. His restaurant, The Ember, had 2 Michelin stars and was widely considered one of the best in the city. How on earth would he be emailing me? I had applied for a dishwashing job there years ago, when I was fresh out of college and needed extra cash, but I hadn't heard back then. Curiosity, a tiny spark in the vast darkness of my despair, made me open it. The subject line read, "Regarding your culinary skills." My heart gave a strange lurch. Culinary skills? What was this? I opened the email. It was short, direct, and completely unbelievable. "Mr. Davison," it began, "I understand this may come as a surprise, I recently had the pleasure of tasting some of your work, anonymously, at a small charity event last month. Your lamb shank with rosemary and root vegetables, in particular, displayed an extraordinary depth of flavor and a remarkable understanding of technique. It was, quite simply, exceptional. I've been looking for someone with your unique, intuitive grasp of flavor and your commitment to authentic, soulful cooking for a new project. I am putting together a small, highly specialized team, and I believe you possess the raw talent and passion that we are seeking. I'd like to offer you a position as a chef de partie at the Ember, effective immediately. If you are interested, please contact my assistant to arrange an interview and discuss terms. I believe your contribution could be truly invaluable. I reread the email. Then I reread it again. My lamb shank. From the charity event Sarah had dragged me to, insisting I make a dish to showcase my potential to her important new friend. She had scoffed at my choice of lamb shank, calling it too rustic for the sophisticated crowd. She had told me it was a mistake, that I should have made something light, something French. But I had gone with my gut, made something from my heart. And now, a 2 Michelin star chef, a literal culinary god, was calling it extraordinary and offering me a job. My hands started to tremble, not from sadness or anger anymore, but from a dizzying mix of shock, disbelief, and a thrilling, terrifying surge of hope. Peasant food, she called it. Peasant food. A Michelin star chef just offered me a job because of it. The irony was a bitter, beautiful punch to the gut. The world, or at least my small part of it, had just been turned completely upside down. I stood there in the silent living room, the peasant food comment still stinging, but now overlaid with the unbelievable words of Chef Thorne. What did this mean? What was I supposed to do? My life had just exploded, and the woman who detonated it was still sitting at the dining table, probably wondering why I was being so dramatic. This was just the beginning. I knew it, and I was scared and exhilarated, all at once. My entire future, whatever it was, had just been laid out on a table, waiting for me to pick it up. I had to figure out what was real, what truly mattered. And if I had the courage to chase it, even if it meant leaving everything I thought I knew behind. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about my life, my worth, and the kind of future I truly wanted to live. The next morning, the smell of burnt toast hung heavy in the air. Sarah was already up, rushing around, getting ready for work. She always made a grand show of her busy mornings, as if her schedule was a badge of honor. I sat at the kitchen island, nursing a cold cup of coffee, the email from Chef Thorne still burning a hole in my pocket, or rather, my phone. Are you still sulking about dinner last night? Sarah asked, not looking at me as she poured herself a smoothie from the blender. Honestly, Mark, you need to develop a thicker skin. It was just constructive criticism. Constructive criticism. Constructive criticism. The words felt like sandpaper against my raw nerves. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hold up my phone and say, "This, Sarah, this is what a real critic thinks of my peasant food." But I didn't. I couldn't. A strange protective instinct had kicked in. This offer, this incredible validation, felt too fragile to expose to her immediate dismissal. It was mine, and for now, I needed to keep it safe. No, I am fine, I lied, forcing a neutral tone. Just a bit tired. She hummed in acknowledgement, a non-committal sound that indicated she wasn't truly listening. Good. Because I need you to pick up my dry cleaning later. And remember, we have dinner with the Millers on Friday. Don't make anything too heavy. Maybe something with fish. A light broth. Sure, I mumbled, my mind miles away, replaying Chef Thorne's words. Extraordinary depth of flavor, remarkable understanding of technique, unique intuitive grasp of flavor. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline, a validation that had been stripped away by the very person who was supposed to be my biggest supporter. After Sarah left, the apartment felt strangely quiet, the silence almost comforting. I pulled out my phone again, staring at the email. Was this a prank? Could it be real? I googled Chef Thorne, the Ember. Everything about him screamed professionalism and excellence. He wasn't the kind of person who would joke about something like this. I walked over to the kitchen island, touching the smooth countertop. This was where I cooked. This was where I poured my heart into meals. And this was where Sarah had systematically dismantled my confidence. I thought about the lamb shank from the charity event. It had been a wild card, a spur-of-the-moment decision to cook something that spoke to me, rather than something I thought would impress. I remembered the feeling of the meat melting under my knife, the rich aroma of rosemary and garlic filling the air. I had felt so alive making that dish, and now that feeling was amplified 100-fold. But then doubt crept in. A Michelin star restaurant. That was a whole different league. I was an amateur, a home cook. Could I really cut it? Pressure, the speed, the precision required in such a kitchen were legendary. Would I be laughed out of there on my first day? What if Chef Thorne had just had a moment of madness? What if it was a mistake? My hands were shaking as I typed out a reply. I decided to play it cool, professional. Dear Chef Thorne, I wrote, thank you so much for your incredibly kind offer. I am indeed very interested. I would be delighted to schedule an interview and discuss this further. Let me know what time works best for your assistant. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The moment the email disappeared from my outbox, a mix of terror and elation washed over me. I had just taken a step, a huge leap into the unknown. For the rest of the day, I walked around in a daze. I did the laundry, picked up the dry cleaning, went grocery shopping for Sarah's light broth fish dinner. But my mind was consumed by the Ember. I pictured the sleek kitchen, the intense chefs, the intricate dishes. It was a world away from my comfortable, predictable life. And the thought of Sarah's reaction to all of this, if it ever came out, filled me with a deep dread. I knew she would see it as a threat, a disruption to the carefully curated life she was building for us. Or worse, she'd find a way to dismiss it, to belittle it, just like she did with my cooking. I remember your conversation from years ago, when I briefly considered culinary school. Sarah had laughed it off then, gently but firmly. Mark, darling, that's just a hobby. You are so good at it. But it's not a career. You are meant for something more stable, something respectable. Back then, I believed her. I settled for a sensible, if unexciting, job in marketing. Now, her words echoed in my mind, laced with a bitter irony. What was respectable now? Her sophisticated life, or the offer from a Michelin chef? I decided to keep the offer a secret for now. It felt too big, too personal to share, especially with Sarah. This was my moment, my secret validation. I needed to explore it, to understand it, before I exposed it to her judgment. The idea of sneaking around, of having this huge, life-altering secret, felt wrong, but also strangely empowering. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I was doing something just for me, something she didn't control or influence. That evening I made the fish dish. It was light, delicate, exactly what Sarah had asked for. She ate it with a polite smile, offering a small, "This is much better, dear. Very appropriate." Her words, usually so impactful, now felt hollow. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized something profound. Her approval no longer held the power it once did. It was still there, the sting of her dismissal, but it was overshadowed by a far greater truth. Someone else, someone who truly understood food, saw something special in me, and that, I knew, was a game changer. The silence between us at the dinner table that night was filled with unspoken words, with the weight of my secret, and with the quiet, terrifying promise of a completely different future. I had no idea what was coming, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of excitement. The next day, a response from Chef Thorne's assistant landed in my inbox. An interview. 2 days from now at the Ember. My stomach did a nervous flip-flop. This was real. This was happening. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of anxiety and frantic preparation. Pulled out all my old cookbooks, the ones Sarah had once praised and now banished to the bottom shelf. I reread sections on classic techniques, on flavor pairing, on the philosophy of great cooking. Practiced knife skills in secret, chopping vegetables in rapid succession, trying to mimic the speed and precision I imagined a professional kitchen demanded. My apartment, once filled with the comfortable routine of our shared life, now felt like a secret training ground. Sarah, meanwhile, was oblivious. She was consumed by her new legal case, her phone constantly ringing, her laptop always open. She barely noticed my absence from the living room, or the subtle clinking sounds from the kitchen late at night. She just assumed I was pottering around, as she called it, a dismissive term for my cooking endeavors. The night before the interview, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. What would they ask? Would they test my cooking on the spot? What if I froze? What if I wasn't good enough? Peasant food comment echoed in my mind, but this time it fueled a fire instead of extinguishing one. I would show them. I would show her. The interview was set for 10 a.m. I dressed in my best, most unassuming clothes. A crisp white shirt, dark trousers. I wanted to look professional, serious. As I left the apartment, Sarah was still asleep, cocooned in her expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. Part of me felt guilty for keeping such a huge secret. But another part, the one that had been bruised and battered, felt a fierce protectiveness over this opportunity. The Ember was even more imposing in person than in pictures. The exterior was sleek, modern, with a subtle, elegant sign. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into a world of hushed professionalism. The hostess, impossibly elegant, greeted me warmly and led me through the pristine dining room. Evan emptied the room, exuded an aura of sophistication and history. We reached the back of the restaurant and the doors swung open into the kitchen. The sudden transition was jarring. From quiet elegance to a symphony of clanking pots, sizzling pans, and shouted commands. It was hot, humid, and exhilarating. Chefs in crisp white jackets moved with an almost balladic precision, each focused on their task. The air was thick with the rich aromas of roasting meat, simmering sauces, and fresh herbs. It was a beautiful, controlled chaos. Chief Thorne was standing by a large, gleaming stainless steel counter, observing his team. He was taller than I expected, with intense, observant eyes and a salt and pepper beard. He looked up as I approached, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Mr. Davison," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm. "Thank you for coming." The interview was less of a grilling and more of a conversation. Sheriff Thorne didn't ask me about my resume. He already knew I was a home cook. He asked me why I cooked, what food meant to me, what flavors excited me. He listened intently as I talked about the comfort of a slow-cooked stew, the joy of fresh seasonal ingredients, the satisfaction of seeing someone truly enjoy a meal I had prepared. I talked about how cooking was my way of connecting, of showing love, of expressing myself. "So," he said, leaning back against the counter, his eyes twinkling, "you believe in soul in food, not just technique." "Yes, chef," I said a little breathlessly. "I believe the best food comes from the heart. Technique refines it, but the soul gives it life." He nodded slowly. "Precisely. That's what I saw in your lamb shank. It was humble, yes, but it resonated with the truth that many technically perfect dishes lack. It had soul. Humble, peasant food." The words clicked into place. He saw the same thing Sarah saw, but his interpretation was reverence, not dismissal. Then came the real test. "We're always looking for new ideas here," he said, gesturing to a small prep station. "What would you make if you had an hour, simple ingredients, and wanted to show me your philosophy on food?" My mind raced. This was it. No pressure, just cook for a 2 Michelin star chef. I scanned the counter. Fresh vegetables, carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, herbs, rosemary, thyme, parsley, a beautiful cut of beef, chicken stock, a small container of good quality red wine. This wasn't about fancy, intricate dishes. This was about showing who I was as a cook. "I'd make a braised beef short rib, chef," I said, my voice gaining confidence, "with a rich, earthy sauce, root vegetables, and a simple but elegant potato puree. It's comfort food, yes, but it's also a canvas for rich flavors and textures. It speaks to the heart." Chief Thorne's eyebrows raised slightly. "Short rib. Interesting. And how would you make it elegant?" I began to explain, describing the searing of the beef for a deep crust, the slow caramelization of the aromatics, the layers of flavor built with wine and stock, the long, gentle braising that rendered the meat impossibly tender. I talked about seasoning, about balancing acidity and richness, about finishing the sauce with a touch of fresh herbs and butter for silkiness. As I spoke, I felt a familiar passion rise within me, a sense of knowing and belonging. I wasn't just talking about food, I was living it. When I finished, Chef Thorne was smiling, a genuine warm smile. "Mr. Davison," he said, "I believe you are exactly what we're looking for. The position is yours. We start next week." My breath hitched. It was real. More real than anything had ever been. "Thank you, chef," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Welcome to the Ember, Mark. Get ready to cook with heart." As I walked out of the restaurant, the bustling city streets seemed to hum with a new energy. I had done it. I had been validated not by Sarah, not by a title or a salary, but by my passion, by the very thing she had dismissed. Peasant food had opened a door I never dreamed existed. Now the daunting task remained, telling Sarah. How could I explain that the very thing she found beneath us was now my path to a future I couldn't have imagined? The weight of the secret and the enormity of what I had just committed to settled on my shoulders. My life was about to change in ways I couldn't possibly foresee, and the realization was both terrifying and utterly liberating. First few days after getting the job offer from Chef Thorne were a strange dance of excitement and apprehension. I hadn't told Sarah yet. The secret weighed on me, a heavy, wonderful burden. I knew I had to tell her, but the thought filled me with dread. How could I explain this sudden, radical shift in my life path? Especially when it stemmed from the very thing she had so casually dismissed. I started spending more time in the kitchen at home, not cooking full meals for Sarah, but experimenting, practicing. I honed my knife skills, trying new techniques, pushing myself to master dishes I'd always wanted to attempt. I was preparing for the Ember, for the challenge of a Michelin star kitchen. The smells of garlic, herbs, and simmering sauces filled our apartment, a stark contrast to the quiet, almost sterile atmosphere. Sarah seemed to prefer these days. Sarah noticed, of course. "Are you still playing around in the kitchen, Mark?" she'd ask, her tone laced with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "I thought you were going to try and find a more suitable hobby. Something more stimulating." Stimulating for her meant networking events, art auctions, and dinner parties with her corporate friends. For me, it was the alchemy of transforming simple ingredients into something delicious. We were growing further apart, our definitions of stimulating diverging dramatically. I'd just mumble something about testing new recipes, and she'd shrug, disappearing back into her work. The gap between us felt like a canyon, and I was holding a secret that would either bridge it or widen it irrevocably. One evening, my old college roommate, Liam, called. Liam was my sounding board, the kind of friend who told it like it was. "Dude," he said, "it's been ages. What's up? Still slaving away at the marketing gig?" "Actually," I began, and then hesitated. Could I tell him? He was loyal, but also very direct. Something big happened. I told him everything. About Sarah's peasant food comment, about the charity event, about Chef Thorne's email, and finally, about the job offer at the Ember. As I spoke, the words flowed out, a torrent of suppressed emotion. It felt liberating to finally voice it all. There was a long silence on Liam's end. Then, a whoop. "No way. Seriously, Mark? A Michelin star restaurant? That's insane. That's incredible. I always told you your cooking was next level. Remember that ridiculous lasagna you made in college? People still talk about it." His enthusiasm was infectious, a much-needed antidote to Sarah's dismissiveness. "Yeah, but it's chef de partie, Liam. It's intense. I am a home cook. What if I mess it up?" "Dude, you are being ridiculous," Liam countered, his voice firm. "Chef Thorne doesn't offer jobs to just anyone. He saw something in you that Sarah obviously can't. And frankly, if she can't see how amazing this is, then maybe that's her problem, not yours." His words hit home. It was her problem, not mine. That thought was both comforting and terrifying. It meant facing the inevitable confrontation with Sarah, the one I had been dreading. "So, what are you gonna do?" Liam asked. "You are taking it, right?" "I already accepted," I confessed, a small triumphant smile breaking through my anxiety. "I start next week." "Yes," Liam cheered. "That's my boy. You deserve this, Mark. You really do." His belief in me, unfettered by judgment or expectation, was a powerful force. It solidified my resolve. I had to pursue this. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to reclaim a part of myself that had been slowly suffocating. That weekend, Sarah decided to throw an impromptu dinner party for a few of her new corporate friends. She announced it late Friday afternoon, giving me barely any time to prepare. "I need you to cook, Mark," she said, her voice brisk. "Something light, elegant. No more of your heavy stews. Remember, these are important people." I looked at the beautiful fresh salmon she'd bought, the delicate asparagus. "How about a pan-seared salmon with a lemon dill beurre blanc and roasted asparagus?" I suggested. It was classic, sophisticated, and something I knew I could execute perfectly. She mused. "Sounds a little basic. Can you elevate it? Maybe a foam, or some kind of deconstructed element?" I clenched my jaw. Foam. Deconstructed. This was her new vocabulary, picked up from trendy restaurants she now frequented. "I think classic elegance speaks for itself, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice even. She sighed. "Fine, Mark. Just try not to make it too rustic. And please wear something appropriate. No more of those faded t-shirts, we need to look the part. The dinner party was a blur. I cooked with a strange detachment, the salmon perfectly seared, the sauce emulsified to a silky sheen. The guests politely complimented the food. Delicious, one said. Very refined, another commented. Sarah beamed as if their compliments were directed solely at her. She even took credit for the menu choice. I told Mark he needed to try something more sophisticated, she announced proudly. I looked at her, at the confident, polished woman she had become, and felt a profound sense of loss. We were living in two different worlds, even under the same roof. The delicious food I had just prepared, which would easily pass muster in any high-end restaurant, was still being framed as a concession to her sophisticated tastes, not a reflection of my own skill. As I cleaned up the kitchen after the guests left, Sarah joined me, still glowing from the evening. See, Mark? That wasn't so hard, was it? You just need to adjust your approach. Tea here is a difference between simple and refined. You are getting better at it. Her words, intended as praise, felt like a condescending pat on the head. She still didn't get it. She still didn't see me, not really. This was the moment I knew it. I put down the sponge, turning to face her. Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Tea here is something I need to tell you. Her smile faltered slightly. She could probably sense the seriousness in my tone. What is it, darling? Is something wrong? I got a job offer, I said, taking a deep breath. From Chef Julian Thorne, at the Ember. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her face. Then, confusion. The Ember, the Michelin restaurant. What? As a consultant? For their marketing? No, I said, shaking my head. As a chef de partie, in the kitchen. I start next week. The silence that followed was death. Her face went from confusion to disbelief, then slowly, undeniably, to anger. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The peasant food comment had been a sting. This, I knew, was about to be the real devastating blow. The future was here, staring me in the face, and I had no idea how it was going to unfold. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either redefine our lives or shatter them completely. The silence in the kitchen after my revelation was deafening, thick with unspoken words and rising tension. Sarah's face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of disbelief and a simmering fury. Her lips thinned into a hard line. A chef de partie, she finally articulated, the words dripping with incredulity, as if I just announced I was joining the circus. Mark, are you serious? You are a marketing manager. You have a stable career. You want to leave all that to work in a kitchen? The last three words were spat out as if they were a disgusting insult. It's a Michelin star kitchen, Sarah. I tried to explain, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hand. It's a huge opportunity. Chef Thorne himself offered it to me. He said he saw something special in my cooking, something unique. Her laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. Special? Unique? He probably felt sorry for you, Mark. Or he's looking for cheap labor. You are a home cook, darling. You have no professional experience. You'll be working insane hours for barely any pay, probably scrubbing pots and pans. Is this some kind of midlife crisis? Because it's a terrible one. Her words were like daggers, each one aimed precisely at my most vulnerable spots. Cheap labor, scrubbing pots, midlife crisis. She was systematically dismantling my dream, reducing it to something pathetic, and laughed. The validation from Chef Thorne, which had felt so powerful just moments ago, began to waver under her onslaught. He offered me a professional position, Sarah. I insisted, trying to hold on to my composure. He tasted my lamb shank from the charity event. He called it extraordinary. He saw potential. "The lamb shank?" she scoffed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "The one I told you was too rustic, too heavy? That's what got you this ridiculous offer." "Mark, you are being naive. He's probably just humoring you. This is a PR stunt, or he's looking for someone to do the grunt work. What about our life? What about our plans? We were building something, a future. A respected one. What are people going to say? My husband, the cook. My husband, the cook." The way she said it, it was clear she thought it was the most shameful thing imaginable. It wasn't just about my cooking anymore. It was about her image, her carefully constructed world. My dream was a disruption, an embarrassment. "This is who I am, Sarah," I burst out, finally losing my cool. "This is what I love to do. You've been telling me for months that my cooking isn't good enough, that it's peasant food. And now, when a world-renowned chef validates it, you call it a joke. What do you want from me?" Her eyes narrowed. "I want you to be sensible, Mark. I want you to be the man I married, the one who was ambitious and focused on our future, not chasing some childish fantasy. We've worked hard for everything we have. My career is taking off. We're finally moving up, and you want to throw it all away to chop vegetables for some temperamental chef? It's absurd. My ambition isn't measured by a corporate ladder, Sarah." I shot back, my voice rising. "My ambition is to create, to learn, to make something meaningful. And it seems like the only one who sees that as childish is you." "Meaningful?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think flipping burgers is meaningful? This isn't some romantic comedy, Mark. This is real life. You don't just abandon a perfectly good career for a pipe dream. What about our finances? What about the apartment? What about our social standing? Do you think my clients will respect me when they find out my husband is a kitchen grunt?" The words stung deep and painful. "Is that all I am to you, Sarah? A reflection of your social standing? Is that all our marriage is about now? Appearances?" "It's about our life together, Mark," she screamed, her carefully composed facade finally cracking. "It's about the life I envision for us, the one where we're successful, respected, where we don't have to worry about money or what people think. This, the cooking thing, it's a regression. It's beneath us, it's beneath you." "It's not beneath me, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet now but firm. A profound sadness settled over me. "It's who I am, and if you can't accept that, then maybe we have a bigger problem than just my career choice." She stared at me, her eyes blazing. "If you take this job, Mark," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "then I don't know what kind of future we have. I really don't. I can't be with someone who's going to actively undermine everything I am working for." Her ultimatum hung in the air, cold and definitive. Choose her and her version of our life, or my dream. My heart ached, torn between the woman I had loved for so long and the passion that now burned so fiercely within me. The choice, once terrifying, was now becoming agonizingly clear. She hadn't just dismissed my cooking. She had dismissed me, my dreams, my very identity. And I realized with a crushing weight that this wasn't just about a job. It was about whether I could continue to live a life where I felt constantly judged, dismissed, and undervalued. The silence that followed her ultimatum was the sound of a bridge collapsing, piece by painful piece. Our future, which had once seemed so solid, was crumbling around us. And I knew with a heavy heart that I couldn't sacrifice my soul anymore. The argument with Sarah lasted well into the night. It wasn't just about the job. It was about everything that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. Her growing disdain for my passions, her obsession with appearances, my feeling of being invisible and undervalued. Her final words, the thinly veiled ultimatum, echoed in the quiet of our apartment. If you take this job, Mark, then I don't know what kind of future we have. I stood my ground. This isn't just a job, Sarah. It's a part of me. It's my passion, and I can't just ignore it, because it doesn't fit your idea of what's She countered with all the arguments she knew would hit hardest. Financial instability, social embarrassment, the disruption to her carefully constructed life. But her words, once so impactful, now felt hollow. The pain of her dismissal, the deep sense of not being seen, was far greater than any fear of the unknown. Eventually exhausted and emotionally drained, we retreated to separate rooms. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the full weight of the decision pressing down on me. I loved Sarah. Or at least I loved the woman I thought she was. The one who supported my dreams, who laughed easily, who saw me. But that woman seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone driven by status and external validation. And I wouldn't, sacrifice my own happiness and identity for a life that felt increasingly stifling. The next morning, the apartment was filled with a chilling silence. Sarah left for work without a word, without even looking at me. Her cold shoulder was her chosen weapon, a silent punishment designed to make me reconsider. But it only solidified my resolve. I knew what I had to do. With a heavy heart, I drafted an email to my marketing firm, giving my 2 weeks' notice. The words felt liberating and terrifying all at once. Then, I emailed Chef Thorne's assistant confirming my start date. There was no turning back now. Later that day, Sarah came home, her face set. She clearly expected me to have buckled, to have come to my senses. "Have you thought about what I said?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. I looked at her, my heart aching with a familiar sadness. "Yes, Sarah, I have." I took a deep breath. "I've accepted the job at the Ember. I start next week." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. The mask of composure dropped completely. "You did what?" she shrieked, her voice rising. "Are you insane? You are throwing away your career, our life, for this ridiculous fantasy." "It's not a fantasy, Sarah," I said, my voice calm but firm. "My passion. It's a chance to do something I truly love, something I'm truly good at. And I can't pretend anymore that I am happy doing anything else." "Happy?" she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You think you'll be happy flipping steaks in a hot kitchen all day? This isn't who you are, Mark. This isn't who we are, Mark. This isn't who we are." "It's exactly who I am, Sarah," I countered, my voice cracking slightly. "And if you can't see that, if you can't accept that, then maybe we can't be us anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Her face went pale, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Are you saying you are choosing this over me?" "I am choosing myself, Sarah," I said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. "I am choosing to pursue my dreams, something I haven't been able to do in a very long time. And if that means we can't be together, then that's a heartbreaking truth we both have to face." She stared at me, then turned away, a choked sob escaping her lips. The argument dissolved into a painful silence, punctuated by her quiet weeping. It was clear our paths had irrevocably diverged. The next few days were a blur of coldness and emotional distance. We existed in the same space, but we were miles apart. The apartment, once our home, felt like a battleground, then a tomb. The air was thick with unspoken recriminations and profound sadness. Within a week, Sarah suggested we separate. It wasn't a mutual decision, not really. It was an acknowledgement of an already fractured reality. She couldn't accept my choice and I couldn't sacrifice my soul. We agreed to a trial separation, hoping, I suppose, that time and distance might magically heal the chasm between us. But deep down, I knew it was over. Peasant food comment hadn't just insulted my cooking. It had revealed a fundamental incompatibility in our values and dream. It was the crack that exposed the fault line in our relationship. Packed a small bag, mostly clothes, a few cherished photos, and my favorite chef's knife. Leaving the apartment, leaving Sarah standing there looking small and defeated, was one of the hardest things I had ever done. The weight of heartbreak was immense, a physical ache in my chest. I was losing the woman I had built a life with, the one I had promised to spend forever with, and all for a dream. That was still just a dream, a job I hadn't even started yet. But even through the tears, even with the immense sadness, there was a flicker of something else. A tiny spark of hope, of self-worth. I was pursuing my truth. I was choosing myself. And as I drove away, leaving behind the life I thought I wanted, I realized that sometimes breaking your heart is the only way to truly find it. The next chapter of my life was beginning, raw and uncertain, but filled with the promise of a future where my passions were celebrated, not dismissed. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a fragile sense of peace. My first day at the Ember was a whirlwind. I arrived early, my stomach a knot of nerves and excitement. Kitchen was already a hive of activity, even before service. Chefs moved with an almost superhuman efficiency, their movements precise, economical. The air hummed with energy, the clatter of pots and pans, the sizzle of food on hot surfaces, the terse shouted commands creating a rhythmic symphony. I was introduced to the team. Chief Thorne himself, with a surprisingly warm smile, presented me to the head chef, a stern but fair woman named Chef Isabella. "Mark is joining us as a chef de partie," he announced to the room. "Treat him well, but don't go easy on him. He's got soul." Soul. The word resonated, a direct counterpoint to Sarah's dismissal. Chef Isabella assigned me to the vegetable station, a bustling area where mounds of fresh produce were being prepped with astonishing speed. "Welcome to the family, Mark," she said, her voice crisp. "Your knives better be sharp." And they were. I had spent hours honing them, recalling every YouTube tutorial and old chef's trick I could remember. My first task was mundane. Peel and dice a colossal mountain of potatoes for the evening's potato puree. It was physically demanding, my hands aching within the first hour. But as I worked, a strange sense of contentment settled over me. This was it. This was real. The pace was relentless. Chief Isabella was a force of nature, her eyes missing nothing. She would bark orders, correct techniques, and push us to move faster, always fast. I learned more in that first day than I had in months of home cooking. I learned about mise en place, the critical organization of all ingredients before cooking begins. I learned about the importance of consistency. Every dice, every slice, every garnish needing to be identical. And I learned about the immense pressure of a Michelin star kitchen, where perfection was the only acceptable standard. I made mistakes, of course. I scorched a batch of roasted carrots, over-seasoned a stock, and once, in my haste, nearly cut off the tip of my finger. Chef Isabella was quick to point out my errors, her voice sharp, but never truly unkind. "Davison, focus. Speed without precision is useless, she'd snap. But then, as I corrected my mistake, she'd nod almost imperceptibly, a small sign of approval. During a rare lull, Chef Thorne walked by my station. He paused, watching me, as I meticulously cleaned and trimmed a batch of asparagus. "How are you finding it, Mark?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Intense, chef," I admitted, wiping sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. "But amazing. It feels right." He smiled. "Good. We don't just cook food here, Mark, we tell a story. We create an experience, and you have a story to tell through your food. Keep that fire burning." His words were a powerful affirmation. They reminded me why I was here, why I had left everything behind. This wasn't just about cooking. It was about finding my purpose, my voice. When I finally stumbled out of the ember that night, my body ached in places I didn't know existed, but my mind was buzzing with an electric energy. I was exhausted, but exhilarated. I had survived. And more than that, I had thrived. I had found a place where my passion was not only accepted, but celebrated. Going back to my small temporary rental apartment felt strange. It was lonely, quiet, a stark contrast to the chaotic vibrancy of the kitchen. I thought of Sarah, of our old apartment, of the life we had shared. A pang of sadness hit me. The emotional wounds of our separation were still raw. I missed the familiarity, the comfort of what we once had. Then I remembered her words, peasant food, beneath us, her dismissal of my very essence. And the ache lessened, replaced by a quiet resolve. I had made the right choice. The next few weeks were a relentless cycle of work, sleep, and learning. I soaked up every piece of knowledge, every technique, every philosophy. I learned from Chef Isabella, from the other chefs de partie, even from the incredibly efficient dishwashers. My hands developed calluses, my speed increased, and my palate became more refined. I was no longer just a home cook. I was becoming a chef. One evening, after a particularly demanding service, Chef Isabella pulled me aside. "Davison," she said, her expression unreadable. "Your purees are getting smoother. Your knife work is improving. You are adapting well." It wasn't a compliment, not really, but in the context of a high-pressure kitchen, it was high praise. "Thank you, chef," I said, a wave of pride washing over me. But she continued, her eyes sharp. "Don't forget your soul, as Chef Thorne calls it. Don't lose the heart in the pursuit of perfection. That's what sets you apart. That's what he saw." Her words were a timely reminder. In my eagerness to prove myself, to master the technical aspects, I had almost forgotten the intuitive, soulful approach that had brought me here. I had to remember that what made my food special wasn't just precision. It was the love and passion poured into it. It was the peasant food that started it all. As I walked home, the city lights blurred around me. I was on a new path, a challenging path, a lonely path in some ways. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The heartbreak of losing Sarah was still there. A dull ache in my chest, but it was slowly being eclipsed by the exhilaration of finding myself. I was forging a new identity, one that was authentic and true. And I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my bones, that this was just the beginning of my true culinary journey. Kitchen wasn't just a place of work. It was a sanctuary, a place of transformation where I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. Life at the Ember was a relentless master. Each day was a challenge, a test of endurance, skill, and passion. I threw myself into it, soaking up every lesson, every technique. My hands, once accustomed to the gentle pace of home cooking, now moved with a blur of precision and speed. The burns on my forearms, the calluses on my hands, the constant ache in my feet were badges of honor. I thrived in the organized chaos of the kitchen. There was a raw, visceral honesty to it that I had never found in my old marketing job. Here, results were immediate. Perfectly executed dish, a flawlessly reduced sauce, a precisely cut vegetable. These were tangible achievements. And the feedback from Chef Thorne or Chef Isabella was direct, unfiltered, and always aimed at improvement. There was no room for pretense, no need for superficial sophistication. Just good food, made with dedication. I was living simply now. My small rental apartment was barely more than a place to sleep and store my chef whites. Most of my waking hours were spent at the Ember. I ate quick utilitarian meals during breaks, often standing up. My social life had dwindled to the camaraderie of the kitchen staff. A shared glance of exhaustion, a knowing grin after a particularly brutal rush, a quiet drink after a late service. They were my new family, bound by the intense shared experience of. The emotional wounds of my separation from Sarah were slowly, painfully starting to heal. The initial sharp pangs of loss had softened into a dull ache. I still thought of her, of course, of the life we had planned. But the sting of her words, peasant food, beneath us, now carried less power. Instead, they served as a constant reminder of why I had chosen this path. Her dismissiveness had been a catalyst, pushing me towards a future where my passion was not only accepted, but celebrated. One evening after a particularly successful service, Chef Thorne called me into his office. My heart pounded. Had I made a mistake? Was I in trouble? He gestured for me to sit. "Mark," he began, his expression serious, "I've been observing your progress. Your technique has improved remarkably. Your speed is impressive. And your palate, it's truly developing." My chest swelled with pride. This was the kind of validation I had craved for so long. But more importantly, he continued, "You haven't lost your voice. Your food still has that inherent honesty, that depth of soul I first recognized. You are not just executing dishes, you are infusing them with something personal." He paused, then leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you. We're launching a new venture next year. A smaller, more intimate restaurant. Still high-end, but focused on a different concept. More approachable, more rooted in authentic ingredient-driven cooking. What some might call, elevated comfort food." He gave me a knowing look, as if acknowledging the irony of my situation. "I want you to be a part of the core development team. And eventually, I want you to head the kitchen." My jaw dropped. Head the kitchen? Me? A home cook who just months ago had been called a peasant food amateur. "Chef," I stammered. "Hi. I don't know what to say. That's incredible." "Don't say anything yet," he cut in, a rare smile gracing his lips. "Just think about it. It would mean even more responsibility, more pressure, but also creative freedom. It's a significant step. You've earned it, Mark." I walked out of his office in a daze. My head was spinning. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. My hands instinctively went to my chest, a small, involuntary gesture of protectiveness over this new, fragile dream. Later that week, I got a text from a mutual friend of Sarah and mine. "Mark, Sarah's asking about you. She seems different, like she misses you." My heart gave a little lurch. "Misses me? After everything?" I typed out a quick, non-committal reply. "I am doing well. Busy with work." I didn't elaborate. The details of my new life, my success, felt too precious, too vulnerable to share with someone who might relay them back to Sarah. It felt almost like a betrayal of my own hard-won peace. A few days later, a letter arrived at my rental apartment. It was from Sarah's lawyer, formalizing the separation terms, moving towards divorce. It was official. The last thread connecting us was being severed. Reading the cold, legal language, a wave of sadness washed over me again. It was truly over. The hope for reconciliation, however faint, was now extinguished. The pain was real, but it was a different kind of pain now. Less sharp, more profound, a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. I remembered Chef Thorne's words, "Keep that fire burning." The fire within me, the passion for cooking, was burning brighter than ever. It had led me here through heartbreak and uncertainty, to a place where I was valued, where I was growing, where I was finally becoming myself. And now, it was leading me to an even bigger challenge, a new beginning. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also knew with a newfound certainty that I was finally on the right path. Peasant food that had once been my undoing was now the foundation of my wildest dreams. I had lost a wife, but I had found my life. And that, I realized, was a trade I was willing to make. A truly liberating exchange. The future, with all its challenges and triumphs, was waiting, and I was ready to cook my way into it. The news of Chef Thorne's new restaurant project and my role in it spread through the Ember kitchen like wildfire. The other chefs offered congratulations, a mix of genuine excitement and good-natured teasing about the immense pressure I was about to face. Chef Isabella, true to form, gave me a rare, almost smile. "Don't screw it up, Davison," she said, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "You've got talent. Don't let it go to waste." Her gruff encouragement meant more than 1,000 compliments. I plunged into the development phase for the new restaurant. It was an exhilarating period of creative freedom. Chief Thorne wanted a place that celebrated honest, flavorful food, executed with the precision of a Michelin kitchen, but served in a more relaxed, accessible setting. It was exactly what I believed in. This was my chance to truly define my culinary voice, to put my soul on a plate. I spent hours researching, experimenting, testing, often late into the night. I revisited old family recipes, drawing inspiration from the comfort food of my childhood, the very kind of peasant food Sarah had scorned. But now I approached them with a refined palate, and the sophisticated techniques I had learned at the Ember. A humble pot roast was transformed into a succulent, perfectly braised dish, with layers of complex flavor. Seaspill roasted vegetables became vibrant, textural masterpieces. I was elevating the familiar, proving that peasant food could be truly extraordinary when treated with respect and skill. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, if painfully. Sarah and I communicated only through our lawyers. There were no emotional outbursts, just the cold, formal process of untangling a lie. It was heartbreaking in its own way, the quiet, dignified end to what had once been a passionate love story. I signed the final papers with a trembling hand, a bittersweet mix of sadness for what was lost and anticipation for what lay ahead. Our story was officially over. As the new restaurant, tentatively named The Hearth, began to take shape, my confidence soared. I was collaborating directly with Chef Thorne, making decisions about the menu, the kitchen layout, even the decor. It was a dream come true, a level of trust and responsibility I had never imagined. One afternoon, while testing a new recipe for a smoked paprika and chorizo stew, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Mark, it's Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. We hadn't spoken directly since the night of our final argument, only through legal channels. I stared at the message, a flood of emotions washing over me. Surprise, a flicker of anger, a lingering sadness and curiosity. What did she want? "I heard about your new project," she wrote. Her message simple, direct. The new restaurant, Chef Thorne's backing you, is it true? I hesitated, then decided to be honest. Yes, Sarah, it's true. A few minutes later, another message came through. I saw the article online, Chef Mark Davison to head new Thorne venture. It looked amazing. Congratulations. Just congratulations. No bitterness, no sarcasm. It was unexpected. Thank you, I typed back cautiously. I also heard you are calling it the hearth, she wrote, because of your comfort food, your peasant food, right? The old phrase delivered without venom. Just an observation. Yes, I confirm. It's about honest, soulful cooking. Food that brings people together. Another pause. Then, a longer message. I am sorry, Mark, for everything. For what I said about your cooking. For not seeing what you had, what you were capable of. For trying to change you. I was so caught up in my own ambitions, my own idea of what success looked like, that I completely missed what was truly valuable. I was wrong, completely wrong. Her apology hit me like a physical blow. It was sincere, heartfelt, and utterly disarming. I hadn't expected it, hadn't even consciously realized how much I needed to hear it. All the pain, all the hurt, began to release its grip. Slowly, allowing a sense of peace to settle in. It's okay, Sarah, I typed back, the words coming easily, genuinely. We both changed. We both wanted different things. We just couldn't see it then. I hope you are happy, Mark, she wrote, her final message. You deserve it. You really do. And then, silence. That was it. The official end of our story, marked not by a legal document, but by a quiet exchange of forgiveness. It was a profound moment of closure, not a rekindling of romance, but a healing of old wounds. The bitterness finally dissipated, replaced by a sense of acceptance and quiet empathy. The hearth opened its doors a few months later. It was a resounding success. Critics raved, not just about the technical brilliance of the food, but about its soul, its warmth, its ability to connect with people on a deeper level. They praised my intuitive grasp of flavor and my unwavering commitment to authentic, soulful cuisine. My peasant food, elevated by skill and passion, was now celebrated. I was living my dream. I was creating, leading, inspiring. The long hours were still there, the pressure still immense, but it was a pressure born of passion, not obligation. I was doing what I loved, surrounded by people who shared my vision. One evening, after a particularly busy service, I stood in the pass watching the last plates go out. Kitchen was humming with a practiced calm, the air filled with the familiar, comforting aromas of delicious food. I thought of that dinner months ago, when Sarah had called my food peasant. It felt like a lifetime ago. The sting was gone, the hurt had faded. Instead, there was gratitude, because that painful moment, that deep wound had been the catalyst. It had pushed me off a path that was no longer mine, and onto the path I was always meant to walk. My life wasn't what I had planned, but it was more fulfilling, more authentic than I could have ever imagined. I had lost a wife, yes, and it had been heartbreaking, but in that loss I had found myself. I had found my true calling, and the food, the peasant food, was not just my livelihood. It was my voice, my story, my heart on a plate. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never been happier. The broken pieces of my past had forged a stronger, more resilient me, ready for whatever delicious challenges the future held.